Well, like in one of those heist movies, they've rounded up the old firm. These are the three people that used to gather in William's office to work on Prime Minister's questions. The Prime Minister's questions went very well, the election didn't. But things are going a bit better now, so this is an opportunity to talk to two people who very much hope to turn their shadow offices into real offices. And I want to talk obviously about the Middle East, but later we'll broaden out into a few other topics too. So, William, I've never had a chance to congratulate you on your speeches on Israel when you were leader, which I thought were particularly well crafted, I thought.
Beautifully written by one D. Finkelstein. You can supply the answers as well as the questions. Okay.
Good. Well, what I wanted to start with is this. Since you were leader, the Conservative Party has modernised, it's trying to move itself into the centre, it's trying to appeal to the electorate, it's trying to cut off the rough edges, not say things that the electorate won't approve of. So where does the kind of aggressive support for Israel, that stance, fit with such a change, the modernised William Hague?
Well, I think foreign policy has to be decided on its merits. I think it's important to explain that in foreign policy, as we approach the foreign policy of the next government, we're not actually looking for differences from the current government. I don't see it necessarily as part of that, of styling the party. It's just a question of doing the right thing. And we don't, as in many areas of domestic policy, say we've got to differentiate from the government necessarily in foreign policy. The foreign policy of a country gains strength to some extent from continuity between parties and having a cross-party and long-term approach. So I don't quite see it in terms you're just asking about.
Okay, then in which case would you say you'd see a difference really on the Middle East, or do you think the government's basically a friend of Israel, so are you, and what you'll see is continuity?
Well, we've got an enormous amount in common. The attachment and support for the whole peace process is obviously there for what's happened after Annapolis, for what the Israeli government are trying to do now. That support is there from the British government today, and it would be there in future. There are certainly differences. The ambassador was just talking about Iran. The government say they're very worried about Iran, but I think, and certainly the Israeli government ministers have agreed with this assessment, the Conservative Party has been at the forefront in the whole of Europe in stating the case about the worries over Iran and about the need for Europe to carry a bigger stick in relation to Iran and follow the United States in financial sanctions before the Americans can offer some more carrots. And so we would have liked to have seen a more energetic approach by the current government, and we are critical of them. Gordon Brown announces sanctions on Iranian oil and gas last November, announces it again last week, and nothing has taken place. Absolutely nothing. So, yeah, there are some differences, but of course they are differences of speed and emphasis rather than of direction.
First of all, the pronunciation of nothing was fantastic. But I just want to take you back, before we discuss the policy issues, to your own commitment and your own. So it always struck me as sort of odd that a person coming, sort of boy from Rotherham, as it were, with no real connection to Israel, should be as staunch, a supporter as you became of Israel. And I wonder where that came from. Is it just an offshoot of your Atlanticism, or is there more to it than that?
It is partly, and partly, when I joined the Conservative Party in 1976, a very long time ago, the first organisation that I joined alongside that was Conservative Friends of Israel. And I think that was part of the idealism at the time. Actually, the ambassador and I discussed a few weeks ago what happened in Britain when it was that some of that idealism was lost. It was something to do with the reaction in Britain to the 1982 Lebanon war, that a lot of people lost that presumption that Israel was always on the right side. I didn't lose that presumption. And many of us, including me, have benefited from the programmes that Stuart has talked about of young members of Parliament going to Israel. So I've always started from that perspective. However, it's also true, it's necessary to say, our foreign policy is not subcontracted to anyone. And people shouldn't expect that to be identical with the view of the Israeli government. That's not been the case with any British government, and I expect it wouldn't be the case with us. But we should start from that presumption that I think I started from in 1976 and that you've always shared.
And I asked David Cameron this, and I wonder what your answer is. Would you call yourself a Zionist?
Well, we're so well coordinated in the Conservative Party now that my answer today is exactly the same as his a year ago. When he said, yes, if a Zionist is someone who believes in the existence of Israel and its right to exist in security, safety and democracy, then yes.
So we just discovered that his research assistant reads the cuttings.
And that I can remember what David Cameron said. There's a great change in the Conservative Party. We now do all say the same things in answer to the same question.
George, can I just ask you the same question, which is, we've had a lot of discussions about Israel, and obviously I know you're committed, but I often wondered where that came from in your case.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, it is an objective view of what Israel has achieved during its existence and the way it represents freedom and democracy in a part of the world that is not familiar with freedom or democracy. And second of all, I mean, one of the things that made perhaps the strongest impressions on me as an MP was a CFI trip where I went with Stuart and an unknown MP called Boris Johnson. And also Mark Francois and Theresa Villas, I don't know if they're here as well, here today. What happened while we were in Tel Aviv was that there was a suicide bombing in Carmel Market. And I thought, interestingly enough, whereas in Britain, if you were a foreign visitor and a bomb had gone off in the middle of London, you would probably be taken as far away from the bomb site as possible. In Israel, we were taken almost immediately to the bomb site. So we were there about an hour and a half after it had gone off and killed 3 people, from my recollection. And to be there in an enclosed market, almost immediately after a bomb has gone off, to see some pretty horrific things with my own eyes, just made a very powerful impression on me, as it did on my fellow MPs, of what Israel is up against the whole time. And I should also say on that trip there were light-hearted moments, because the 4 MPs, myself included, ended up singing Israeli resistance songs in a karaoke bar in Tel Aviv, and I've always assumed the Mossad did its job and took the photograph of the Mayor of London and the Shadow Chancellor doing this, and they're on file somewhere.
Do you want to sing us a bit now? Or?
Well, Boris was better at the words than I was.
Particularly because of your stance during the Iraq War, George, quite a lot of people have taken to saying George Osborne is a neoconservative. Is that a title that you would recognise?
Well, I think the actual term neoconservative is a much abused term and has also been much misunderstood. The actual meaning of neoconservative is located in part of American political history in the last 20 or 30 years, and it should properly apply to people who were on the left of the political spectrum in the United States and then moved to the right, often not on foreign policy issues but on domestic policy issues, like fighting crime in New York. And I'm a great admirer of some of the domestic policy work that they do. On the way it became applied to kind of George Bush's foreign policy, in a rather crude and misunderstood way. I was and remain a supporter of the Iraq War. I voted for it. Although I think many things went wrong after the war, and we have paid a very heavy price for that, and our soldiers continue to risk their lives because of some of those mistakes, that doesn't alter my view that the war was the right thing to do at the time. And I think there are, of course, many, many lessons, and indeed I very much agree with William that we should have an inquiry into all the issues around the Iraq War, not least because we need to learn lessons. But I do think when it comes to countries like Iran or other states that threaten us, that we need to be very tough and we shouldn't rule out military options. That's not the same thing as ruling in military options, but it does mean not ruling them out. And I think we have to be very hard-headed and realistic about the world in which we live.